Do you ever watch the cinematics and trailers that get produced for games nowadays? They look incredible, don't they? They're incredible, higher budget animations made to hype up their games as much as possible, and they do a really, really good job of it. But most of the time, it doesn't really do such a great job of representing the gameplay. Like this cinematic, incredible, awe-inspiring, absolutely mesmerizing. This game must be incredible, it must be... Oh. What about this one? This looks so cool, man. Look at Sylvana, she's so cool. Well, this one's closer, but it's still not there, is it? There's countless examples of this out there, where the cinematic doesn't represent the...
Tedric? Hey, Tedric!
Help me! Help me!
Jesus Christ. Well, there's no way that like, accurately represents the gameplay, surely. Like, there's no way that Fiddlesticks is actually like that in the game. Oh my god. Fiddlesticks is meant to be a horrifying demon. Most people in the League universe don't even think it's real, just a folk story told to scare children. It is meant to be a terrifying abomination that feeds on the fear of its victims. A concept as complex and ethereal as this is extremely hard to convey inside of gameplay with just 4 abilities and a passive to work with, but this character right here does an incredible job of it. Fiddlesticks in the actual game is just as much of a jump scare as he is in the cinematics, and the reason for it is all down to his genius ability design. Of course the visuals are a massive part of it, but if Fiddlesticks looked like Fiddlesticks but had the kit of Heimerdinger, he wouldn't be very scary, would he? The visuals are really important, but visuals alone cannot authentically sell the fantasy of a character. The gameplay needs to reflect it too. In Fiddlesticks' case, the way his Q, his passive, and his ultimate work and synergize together sells the horrifying monster fantasy incredibly well. Fiddlesticks' Q is a single target spell that fears any target he uses it on. It's essentially just a stun, but their character will walk around slowly while under the fear's effect. But his Q also has a secondary effect. If Fiddlesticks does damage to an enemy with a spell whilst they can't see him, they will also be feared in the exact same way. This effect does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to making Fiddlesticks feel like a horror movie. This effect forces Fiddlesticks to constantly hide out of sight of his enemies. He's forced to stalk his enemies out of vision until the perfect moment to strike finally appears. It also helps with balancing the character, because he has very, very clear counterplay. Vision control. If you know where Fiddlesticks is, and you know that he's coming, he's much weaker and he's much easier to avoid. But if he has the element of surprise, he's almost guaranteed to kill you. His ultimate Crowstorm is another piece of the puzzle. Fiddlesticks charges his ult for 1.5 seconds. After the charge, he teleports to a target location and begins dealing massive damage in an area around him. If Fiddlesticks uses this ability from out of sight of his enemies, there is no way for them to see it coming, and it will activate his Q's passive and fear all enemies struck by the first tick of his ultimate. So you're saying he can instantly appear in your face and murder you before you have any chance to react? That sounds familiar. The icing on the cake is his passive, a harmless scarecrow. This allows Fiddlesticks to place scarecrow effigies around the map. These effigies will stand perfectly still in the pose of a scarecrow until enemies get near. Once an enemy gets close to the effigy will pretend to attack or run away from the enemy before disappearing. If the real Fiddlesticks stands still for more than 2 seconds, he will also assume this pose, and the real Fiddlesticks will look exactly the same as the fake ones to the enemy team. This allows for good Fiddlesticks players to play mind games with the enemy team. Pretending to be an effigy can give you just enough time to get the better of your opponents who weren't paying close enough attention. This also increases the skill ceiling of the character, allowing more skilled players to condition their opponents into ignoring certain effigy placements, or using them to fake out Baron and Dragon steals and stuff like that. His passive is the cherry on top to making Fiddlesticks really play out the fantasy that he has in the story. There are other characters in League of Legends that do quite a good job at this same thing, but Fiddlesticks is certainly the best at it. There are also, of course, characters that do a terrible job of it too, but that's not really a problem. Doing this sort of thing is extremely difficult, which is why most characters in most games don't even try. There's plenty of games where you're just some dude who finds himself up against insurmountable odds, but still manages to feel like a powerful killing machine despite the circumstances. Or rare cases like The Binding of Isaac, where you're a terrified and abused child running away from a murderous mother, but you still manage to become an all-powerful god and literally kill Satan himself. But that's okay. It's fun to be powerful in video games, so we suspend our disbelief for the sake of fun. But sometimes, it can be really cool to have a character's fantasy, story, or even personality reflected within the gameplay. Another game that does a great job of this sort of thing is Resident Evil 7. You are powerless in the face of the Baker family, and the way the gameplay functions makes you feel exactly that way. Your movement speed is slow, your guns don't deal much damage to anything, and when you do finally defeat the big scary monster, the fights were long and grueling. The only power the player character really has is the ability to take massive damage and survive. Other than that, Ethan is very physically weak and very slow, which helps to emphasize just how powerless you are in the circumstances. There's other games that use this gameplay strategy too, where the main character feels helpless. Like Dark Souls. A lot of the bosses in Dark Souls are enormous monstrosities. Everything squashes you in one hit. The game was designed to make the world feel oppressive and hopeless, and to make the player character feel completely helpless. Sure, you're not just some dude, you're basically the chosen one, the prophesized Dark Lord or whatever, but you're still very weak compared to a lot of the enemies and bosses that you face up against. And the harsh design of Dark Souls is there not only to make you feel weak, but to make the world itself feel hopeless and unrelenting. There's also this game, which does the exact same thing, but we talk about that game way too much on this channel, so we'll just leave that for today. There are many more examples of game design that reflects the fantasy of the character that you play, or the world that you play in. Too many to talk about in this video. If you have any good ones that I didn't mention, please do let me know in the comments. Design like this isn't necessary to make a character or game well designed, but it's a very nice touch that can make a game feel just that much more immersive. Thanks for watching.